No, I'm not signing it. No, ain't going
I was
there.
looking for a ride yesterday from you.
Ain't signing it.
You didn't
What
see me
happens
come
if
off
you
the
prevent
boat?
it?
and all that stuff? Hold on.
Enough.
I heard your voice.
It's not on the agenda.
I'm sorry.
Meeting hasn't been called to order yet.
She's going downstairs to turn the video and audio
Yes.
on, so my suggestion to you is it might not be a good thing to continue to say.
I'm not getting an answer from Barry. I'll try Bobby.
It's
right there.
Um,
Oh, yay.
Hey, Bobby.
Don't have to try Bobby.
The wheel will start as soon as Glenna comes back out because she is getting the recording definition turned on.
Just so you know, it's posted downstairs at 3:30.
On the little,
Yeah,
that's not the official post.
Yeah,
I
it's
know, I
three-
just
it's
wanted you to
3:15. I saw
I
that.
saw
Well, you're
that.
special.
No, I know it was 3:15 for us. I just wanted to say.
Incorrect.
How the hell are you?
So I can't get an answer from Barry, so, and Ian's on the phone right
Yeah,
there.
Ian is on the phone. So we do have a quorum.
Yep.
It is 3:15, the posted meeting time for, did you turn this on, Glenn? Time for our regular monthly meeting. And there is a quorum in attendance, so I would call the meeting to order. The agenda was circulated and then recirculated, and with town council here, he has another appointment. So the agenda shows that the guests are here, and first item on the agenda. So I just wanted to make it clear that with everybody, satisfactory to everybody, that be the first matter of discussion on our agenda. And if that's so, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, carries. The agenda shows that we should approve the minutes of the April 18 meeting. Those have been circulated. Entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. The issue with respect to our guests, Kara and Diane and town council, and the town manager is also here. The newspaper is also here, and I'm afraid I don't know you in the back. Okay, thank you.
Heidi's a procurement officer.
Pardon?
Heidi's a town procurement officer.
Okay, thank you. Was to have a discussion with respect to the status of the project. Two parts. Number one, with respect to the contract relationship between the CPC and the town, and town council's opinion, and then with respect to the status of the project. And I would like to suggest that perhaps, John, you could give us an update. I have circulated the correspondence between town council Libby and myself relative to the opinion as to the arrangement between the town and the CPC, which is different than the arrangement between the CPC and private institutions. And as a result of that, there was a request that I made on behalf of the CPC to have town council draft a draft memorandum of understanding that would be the basis for transactions between the CPC and the town. So, John, if you would, I think you have to come up to the mic, yeah.
Sure.
And just give a quick synopsis of the opinion and then of the draft MOU.
You get to comment on this, right?
Absolutely.
Excuse me. Is that yours?
Oh, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I think the putting aside the specifics of the turf field project, when I was first asked to look at this, the concern that I had was that there appeared to have been a practice by the CPC to use the standard form grant agreement that you've been using very successfully with private nonprofit organizations when you grant funds. As you know, it's been our consistent recommendation, and I'm happy to report that you, as the CPC, have been doing it correctly for a long time now, unlike some other CPCs that will remain nameless. The important thing is that in order to ensure that there's a valid public purpose whenever you grant money to a private nonprofit, you at a minimum need to have a grant agreement in place. That's an enforceable agreement between the town and the recipient to make sure those funds are expended for the purposes for which they were appropriated. And of course, you also have, in appropriate circumstances, historic preservation restrictions depending upon the nature of the project. At some point, though, the practice sort of morphed into using that same grant agreement form for town-sponsored projects. Now, what do I mean by a town-sponsored project? When the town applies to the CPC for funding a project that's going to be undertaken by the town, the playing fields are a good example of that. Those are CPA funds that were appropriated, but the town, in expending those funds, has to comply with all of the procurement requirements under state law, including the public bidding laws. When I saw that, my recommendation to the chair and to the town manager was that I did not think that was an appropriate vehicle, and certainly not using the form that you use with private nonprofits. And the few grant agreements that I saw for the Nobadia project generally, but not for the turf fields, was that it was an agreement that was between the DPW director and the town manager, with a sign-off by the Community Preservation Committee. And that just wasn't the right way to do it. My recommendation instead is that you being the Community Preservation Committee, enter into a memorandum of understanding with the town manager as approved by the Board of Selectmen that details the process by which the project will go forward. So we're going to get rid of this concept of a grant agreement, and instead, again, my recommendation is an MOU, but it should be between the Community Preservation Committee and town administration. And so I put one together in sort of skeletal form, and I believe you all have a copy of that. And I'm happy to discuss any questions you have about that. I think it would be fruitful to get an agreement. Ken and I were talking before the meeting. Even though the turf project is almost complete, I think it would be wise to enter into the grant agreement, modify to reflect the current status of the project, and then you'll see in there's a reference to a prior grant agreement. Well, in fact, there isn't a grant agreement for this phase of the project, so we'll have to take that out. And then going forward, you can use this MOU as a template for future town projects that are funded by the CPC. Now, let me explain the real problem or issue that I saw, and that is whenever the town undertakes a public construction project, there are very strict procurement rules that apply to the town. You have to have an engineer or an architect retained in accordance with the procurement laws. You need to have a set of detailed specifications. You need to issue an invitation for bid. And the project has to proceed exactly in accordance with those bidding specifications unless there's a change order that's agreed to by the general contractor and the town going forward, either because there are unknown subsurface conditions that arise or the town wants to make certain changes to the specifications. And those are very tightly regulated under state law. And that is basically the purview of the Attorney General to enforce the public construction laws that we're talking about. In addition to that, there are provisions in the general laws that requires the awarding authority, which in the case of a town project is the town manager with the approval of the Board of Selectmen. That's the way your charter is set up. The town manager has the contracting authority, is responsible for ensuring that there's compliance with the public construction laws, and in fact has to, the town accountant has to certify in every one of these contracts that there is an appropriation sufficient to support the full cost of the contract and that the person signing the contract on behalf of the town is authorized to do so, and also to approve all requisitions and change orders. So again, these are very strictly regulated areas of procurement that the town simply has to follow. So I drafted a MOU with those requirements in mind, and that's what you see in front of you. The way this would work is, because I certainly understood from speaking with Ken, and I think the town manager agrees as well, that it is appropriate for the CPC to have some kind of a role in monitoring these projects, or at least being informed of how these projects are going forward, but not to approve requisitions and change orders. That is something that, in my opinion, would be inconsistent with the requirements of the general laws and could potentially result in the town having issues with general contractors who are selected on the basis of bids. But what we've structured here is a mechanism whereby the specifications before they go out to bid would be submitted to the CPC for review and comment, as would all requisitions and change orders as the project went forward, again for review and comment. But the ultimate responsibility for signing off on those, approving them, and ensuring compliance with the public bidding laws is the responsibility of the awarding authority, which in this case is the town manager. And the town manager may delegate that authority to any entity within town administration that she determines is the appropriate agency to carry out the project. So that's basically what we've come up with. I'm happy to answer any questions, or to, we can discuss changes to the MOU or things that you'd like to see in there.
Linda?
I'm having a lot of trouble with this MOU. I do agree that the grant agreement doesn't work for the town at all. We just hadn't gotten that specific in these grant agreements before.
Yep.
So I do agree that an MOU with the town on any town project is essential for both sides to be comfortable. I don't look at this as a template for anything. I see this as being entirely in favor of the town and taking the power away from the CPC, which is a separate freestanding entity with several of us elected.
If I can just say one thing, Linda, and I apologize because I meant to incorporate this into my remarks. The authority of the CPC by law is set forth in your bylaw.
Right.
And that bylaw grants this to the CPC the authority to do basically two things: to study the community preservation needs of the town and to develop a report, and then to recommend to town meeting appropriations from the community preservation
After hearing.
fund. Yeah, right, exactly. Now, there is nothing in your bylaw that confers authority on the CPC after that appropriation is made at town meeting. And in fact, even if you wanted to make some changes in that regard, those changes to the bylaw could not be inconsistent with the town charter.
Right. I was on the Charter Commission.
Okay.
So I'm well familiar with the charter. My problem lies in the language. By the project, I assume in this particular case you mean the Parks and Rec application to the CPC for the fields, which is what it's been for 7 years. As a project manager for 7 years, I've been through everything with this project. I'm having trouble with the town manager, not the town manager personally, but the town manager position in this document gets to decide who the CPC representative is. I don't think so. It gets to July 1, we have all the new projects, we have continuing projects. And the CPC decides among ourselves who would best fit a particular project to be the project manager, and I assume the word project manager has some issues.
Yep.
Given this issue, given what's happened with the fields.
We talk about act as its representative.
That's fine. Which, however the language wants to
Right.
go between project manager, project liaison, between the CPC and the project, whatever, for funding issues and making sure it's in compliance with the original application.
Right.
But nowhere does it give the town manager the right to appoint which member of the CPC should be the project liaison. I'm having a great deal of trouble, and that's all rife through the second page. So I am not in favor of this MOU at all, with the town manager being able to dictate to the CPC who, whatever project it is, whether it's the boathouse, whether it's the monument, whichever project it is, they get to dictate or approve or disapprove, and that's what it says, who from the CPC can be on a particular project. That's not how we function. That's not how it's ever functioned. It's not how it's ever functioned with any of the other town projects, and we've had many. I think they're our largest recipient between the land bank and the other projects that the town has needed funding. The 2-week thing, I think we've already been over that. That's essential that the 2-week thing has to be in there because you have to pay within 2 weeks.
Right.
We understand that.
Right.
But it says the town manager shall have the final determination as to the scope of the project documents. I don't know if that means the submission from Parks and Rec or Land Bank, or if that means...
What it means is...
What does that mean?
What it means is that it is not only the responsibility of the CPC, but also the town manager to ensure that funds, CPA funds, are expended consistent with the appropriation at town meeting. That's a joint responsibility. So, but it is the town manager who's the awarding authority for a public construction project. So Libby is responsible when she does the final sign-off on the specifications that the project will be constructed in accordance with the vote of town meeting.
That's fine. That's what the project manager, for our sake of argument, is supposed to be doing, and that's what is supposed to be happening when we vote to approve the requisitions for that particular month or whatever. I'm still not.
Could I?
I'm not done.
No, but I'm going to stop you because I think you are done, because here's where you're getting off track. And correct me if I'm wrong, John.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. Can I finish getting my things clarified by the town attorney, please?
What else do you need to have clarified in the notes?
It also says the chairman of the CPC or so designated continue to file the required reports. Yeah, that's fine. Following review and approval by the town manager, which means that none of our reports that Neville or Glennon has to file with this DOR every month, we're not allowed to do that. It has to go through town manager. Now, when did the CPC lose control of ourselves on a town project to the town manager? I'm confused, because every month we come back here, we've got only about 3 or 4 this week, but every month we come back here for 7 to 9 on an average, and we have to talk about them, and the project manager gives a report, and we say, yes, that's within the scope of the project, St. Paul's Monument, whatever. We have a process we followed very efficiently for 12 years. It's never been a problem up until now. And it looks to me like the funds can continue to come out of our line item for the field, let's say, without us ever seeing it again. And we're feeling comfortable that it's still within the scope. I understand there's going to be another pair of eyes looking at it because of statutory requirements, but it seems like whoever is involved with any town project and the CPC is aced out by a document that reads this way.
See, with all due respect, Linda, I'm going to disagree with you on that. What this MOU says is that there is a process for the CPC to take a look at how the funds are being expended and to report to the town manager if, in your opinion, there's an issue with the way the funds are being expended. That's the intent.
But when do we see them? How does it work?
You look at the specifications.
The project manager.
You look at the specifications before they go out to bid, and you review all requisitions and change orders. There are basically, that's basically what this says. That makes it consistent with the public bid laws.
Right, and the requisition is with the request for the funds to come out. So this document, as I read it, indicated that we got a chance to look at the requisition for funding before the monies were used to satisfy the needs that was being addressed.
And if you have an issue, Ken, that is, if the CPC has an issue with the way those funds are being expended, then you have a mechanism, and I would say a fiduciary responsibility to point that out to the town administration or whoever has been designated as there's only really one project manager, and I think
Right.
it's only a question of semantics, but whoever the town project manager is has to be notified, and it's their responsibility, when they get that information from the CPC, is to conduct a dialogue to make sure everyone's in agreement that the funds will only be expended for the purposes for which they were appropriated.
And Linda, just to, what John and I were talking about was that, assuming that we agree to this in principle, that we flush out a little bit more detail with respect to the actual procedural steps, because procedural steps that, for instance, in this case, Kara has to take are consistent with the procedural steps that we would take in terms of approving the monies going out, but she would be having to be satisfied that the request for the monies coming out are consistent with the application.
But
So
we still get review.
that's what
already
this
in the
document.
process.
That's what this document says.
But there are
But-
2 points where they're giving up
Right.
our control to the town manager to interfere with CPC functioning
you have-
as to who is
Yeah.
the
Okay,
project manager.
as far as that's concerned, you have to work that out with the town manager and with town administration.
It's in here, that's my problem.
Well, yes, it's in there, but that has to be worked out, because ultimately, it's the town manager who's responsible under the law to ensure that the town complies with the public bidding
Oh, yeah.
requirements. So that's a policy question that I don't need to get involved in.
Have you, in your questions answered with respect to your questions on the interpretation of the document?
Somewhat. I'm still going to have somebody write it down for me.
Fine. Bobby?
I just want to clarify in my mind how this whole system works, because I think, first of all, I don't think we have in town projects, I don't think we should call the CPC project manager, project
No,
manager. So let's just take that name
no,
off the
Yeah.
table.
That's,
But my understanding is, an application comes to us from the town, whether it's through Parks and Rec, whether it's through town administration, whether it's through the fire department, the police department, whatever department it comes to us as a town-sponsored project, land bank, whoever. We review the application in September, we go through the document, we make our deliberations, we decide whether to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and then
Right.
we decide how much money to give it.
That's correct.
At that point, it goes to town meeting.
Correct.
Town meeting votes on it. They give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Right.
If it gets a thumbs up, at that point, the bid is advertised. That's when we should review.
That's-
When the bid goes out, before a bid is accepted.
Yeah.
Once the bid has been advertised and accepted, our role in that project, in my understanding, the way this works with a town project, is done. We don't sit here and say, we can give updates as to the status of the project, but we can no longer go in and go, we want this done this way, or we want that done
No,
that way.
we
Once
can't.
the bid is awarded, we're done. We're out of the project except to just give updates.
No, no, this was, the concept here was that we're out of the project except to review when requisitions are made for the funds to come out to pay for the work that was approved by the project, that was approved for the project, that we get a chance to review that prior to the money actually going out.
Is that
And if
Review
you're-
and comment.
Yes,
that-
review
that
and
is
But we
comment.
correct.
can't stop the payment anymore.
No, absolutely not.
Once the bid is accepted and the project goes out, we can say we
No.
might not like it, but the process goes on.
No, but the
No,
point, no,
Unless
the
it's
point.
outside the application.
Bobby,
at a time, please.
Bobby, the issue that I understood was represented by this language in my discussions with John was that if we saw an issue, at that point in time, we would get to raise it with the project representative from the town, indicating that we believe that this was not within the scope of the project that was approved at town meeting. At that point in time, there's a discussion and a resolution as to whether it is or isn't, okay? So in a sense, that what I was trying to ensure was that our responsibility as a CPC with respect to reporting by September of each year that the funds were appropriately expended according to the vote at town meeting, that we had a mechanism in place that we would be able to certify based on the documentation that had been delivered to us, that we could make that certification.
But we can't hold up to funds, is what I'm saying.
No.
Once the bid goes out, the payment process is done strictly through town administration at that point.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think the critical issue for the CPC is whether or not the project is consistent with the town meeting appropriation and your recommendation. You determine that when you review and comment on the specifications.
The RFP.
No, it's an invitation for bid
Oh, the first
with,
one.
with the specifications. The only other time that issue should ever come up is if there's a change order that's being considered, because by definition, a change order is changing the scope of the project. It may be simply an increase in money because of a concealed condition, but it could also be, for whatever reason, there's going to be a change in the project delivery. You should have the same review and comment role at that point, and that's what's built in here.
Tara first, and then Carol.
The one thing I'd like to point out is there's, as far as the town goes, or the departments of towns, like this past year, we saw the DPW come in front of us asking for money for the flagpole and all that type of thing. Regarding the one specific project with the fields, is that it's a Parks and Rec Commission project. The Parks and Rec Commission on Nantucket has a state charter, which is kind of different than just being a town of Nantucket created board or commission meeting. I didn't think we'd get into this, so I don't have the things, but if you looked at the charter for Nantucket, it says it's based on the Parks and Rec Commission is going to run as if the state, through the state charter, and what the same language that's in the state charter. If you look at the state charter, it actually states that the Parks and Rec Commission has actual power that we're supposed to be able to have over what goes on and what is done in the parks. So when this project was started 7 years ago, it was a Parks and Rec Commission project. We actually had a Parks and Rec department under the town of Nantucket to help do our work. Ever since the Parks and Rec department has disappeared, we've just kind of let things go, and the town has taken over the project, but it's not really their project. It is still the Parks and Rec Commission project. So regarding this specific project, I don't feel that the town manager should have control over things related to determining the final scope of the project documents. The Parks and Rec Commission, for this project, the field house project that comes after this, should solely be the original applicant, who was the commission, and not solely the town of Nantucket. It should have been, it's a joint thing, in my view, of the two working together, and it's not a town project solely.
Well, the only thing I would say in response to that, and I certainly appreciate your comments, is that under the town charter, the Parks and Rec Department is now part of town administration.
But we're not. This is not a department. It's a commission.
Well, there are two things. There's the Parks and Rec Commission, which is appointed by, I believe, the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
And there's the Parks and Rec Department, which is essentially their administrative staff.
But this was a Parks and Rec Commission project, not a Parks and Rec Department project.
But see, here's the problem again. If town meeting had authorized, and this gets a little bit complicated, but let's assume you didn't have a charter, and this project comes before town meeting for an appropriation. Had town meeting authorized the Parks and Rec Commission to enter into all contracts to carry out this project, I would agree with you. But the Parks and Rec Commission doesn't have independent contracting authority, either under state law or, because of your charter, under the town charter, which gives that authority solely to the town manager with the approval of the selectmen. And a town charter may deviate from the requirements of the general laws as a home rule charter, because that's the way you have chosen to govern yourselves.
That's not how it's written in the Town of Nantucket Charter. So in the Town of Nantucket Charter, which is the same exact thing as the state of Massachusetts, we are actually supposed to have power and control over the project. So the town saying that they're in control isn't really fair.
She's the
I'm the Parks and Rec Commission.
No, I understand that.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. We're kind of drifting off topic here.
No, I don't think we are at all. This is exactly on topic.
Well, respectfully, this has to do with the interface of the Park and Rec Commission and how the town works with it. And so I'm just a little concerned that for our purposes, and I think I'm not saying you're not asking good questions, but I think if I were sitting on your board, I'd want to be hearing this whole conversation and dialogue so that the entire commission is up to speed and they understand how their role interfaces with the town.
If I may respond to that, Barry, I'm sorry, I don't think you were here when we started this conversation. We're talking about the MOU, and I'm specifically referring to this thing that says town manager as the awarding authority for the town under the Massachusetts Public Construction Laws, and in particular, this thing shall have the final determination as to the scope of the project documents. So I'm bringing this up regarding this specific project and regarding this specific line in the MOU. I'm not talking about the Parks and Rec. I'm talking about the MOU that's currently in front of us. And that's why I'm discussing it. Otherwise, I wouldn't discuss it.
All right. I'm going to respectfully disagree with you. I think you're asking a lot of pointed questions about how the Park and Rec Department. I don't want to go back and forth with you. I really don't.
I'm not asking any questions. I'm just...
If I may, Mr. Chairman, so the focus that I had in drafting the MOU was addressing what the role of the CPC would be vis-a-vis town-funded projects, and that's what I've tried to achieve, at least with this draft. If there are other issues surrounding the Parks and Rec Commission, and they want to raise those with town administration, I do think that's a different issue than what's before the CPC today.
Well, Carol, you had your hand up, and if you want to yield to Rich and then Bobby.
My hand, I'll yield to Rich for now.
Okay, Rich.
We've had the grant agreement in place a couple of years.
Chairman?
Yes? Ian?
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Ian.
Thank you. With regards to the MOU, paragraph 5, reporting to the Department of Revenue, where it says CPA funded projects following review and approval by the town manager. I understand why it would be reviewed, but I don't see why it would necessarily be approved by town manager. In other words, it seemed to me that part of the role of CPC, then with regards to DOR, is to present an independent assessment. So that would my feeling would be that should be changed to following review by the town manager. Thank you.
Ian, this is John Giorgio speaking. The reason why it's worded that way is because the town manager is ultimately responsible for the project because it is a town-sponsored project. She is the awarding authority. It is her responsibility to ensure that the funds are expended not only in compliance with the public bidding laws, but also the appropriation at town meeting. Now, there is a dual responsibility there. Obviously, the CPC has that interest and responsibility as well. So, in terms of filing that report with the state, that's something that I believe the chairman of the CPC took upon himself early on, and that's great. And we're not suggesting that that be changed. But it is the responsibility of the town as a whole to make sure that the funds are being expended in accordance with the appropriation, and that's, I believe, the purpose of that DOR form.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, Don. I guess I was more worried about the intrinsic check and balance of dispersing revenues through CPC. I take your point.
You're Rich and then Bobby.
John, so the grant agreements have been in place a couple of years. Prior to the official grant agreement that we've been using over the last couple of years, weren't we using a template of a memorandum of understanding, and wasn't there signed memorandums of understanding specifically as it relates to these park and rec projects over the last 5, 6, 7 years between the CPC and the town?
I have seen a couple of grant agreements. They're entitled grant agreements for earlier parts of the Nova Deer project. Now, they say that they're between the town and the Parks and Rec in the title, but the two that I saw were signed by the DPW director, the town manager, with a sign-off by the CPC. So when I looked at those grant agreements, I said to myself, this is a DPW project, because it was the DPW director that actually executed those grant agreements. Now, but again, those grant agreements are not appropriate for town-sponsored projects.
So there was some form of agreement in place. Maybe it wasn't
Yes.
technically
Yes.
correct or legally correct.
Yes.
I got two questions or issues. Basically, we're circumventing. After 13 years of operational procedures that have been in place, I would say probably without too many issues since 2001 to today, we're now looking at, as a result of issues that have transpired over the last 6 months to 8 months as it relates to this one specific project, we're being asked to change how we operate as a committee and how we interact with town and town projects. So that's a lot to digest, because 13 years is 13 years, and we've got a track record, and I don't want to say it's all great, but it's pretty positive. That being said, without asking this committee for us to get a second opinion, no offense, where we would have to go to town manager and ask for that approval, there is a state site that I think this committee should entertain, where we can take your opinion that you just recently crafted and take this draft MOU and send it to dislaw@dor.ma.us and ask for their opinion. I think that at a minimum is something that this committee owes to the town, that we should have a free service out of the state DOR, take a look at where we're headed and where we're going before we sign. And I'm not making that a motion, but I can make it a motion that we forward your information to this site, which is a free site, and get their opinion, which probably takes 2 or 3 weeks.
I'll second the motion if you're going to make the motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman, have you talked about this site? And I'm a little fuzzy on it.
We have not talked about the site.
All right, because I'd really like to know a little bit more about who this is and where it's being sent off to and what their specific roles are.
It's a DOR site. I've been there once before, a long time ago.
Are you familiar with it?
That does not sound familiar to me. I know there's the Community Preservation Coalition,
Right, but
obviously, and with all due respect, I think they're great. They do a terrific service, but they do tend to give out advice to CPCs that enhance the authority of CPCs, which is fine, except if you have a charter and a bylaw. That, I would submit, is where you have to look first. I'm not sure what this other site is. We've certainly we've had many conversations with the DOR Division of Local Services, in particular Kathleen Colleary, and it's always been our understanding, based upon those conversations, that the advice we've been giving out, which is consistent with the advice I'm giving you now, is consistent with the DOR's view. However, most times, the DOR is going to say, in this kind of a circumstance, ask your town council. Because what are the variables here? The variables are your town charter, your CPC bylaw, both of which can have a profound effect on the outcome of the answer. And I would respectfully submit that you should read your CPC bylaw, if you haven't done so recently, and understand the charter provisions, and to see the extent of the CPC's authority. This, again, was an attempt. The town manager asked me to draft up an MOU that would get rid of the baggage that those grant agreements have, and come up with a process going forward that would have a meaningful role for the CPC, and still preserve the responsibilities of town administration with respect to town-sponsored projects. That's what I tried to do.
Any further discussion with respect to the motion?
Well, I strongly agree with Rich, because as we all know, legal opinion is legal opinion. It's one person's or one lawyer's interpretation of something, and I think it is a disservice to the Nantucket CPC going far beyond the turf fields to not seek an independent opinion on this interpretation of the law.
With respect to,
With respect to the MOU, I also feel that as an applicant, as a recipient, as a potential future applicant, this is really overstepping by the town of Nantucket.
just for clarity, the MOU only relates to any application from a town entity
Yes. Right.
to the CPC.
Yes.
Not with respect to private organizations.
Right.
All right, and so, okay.
Okay,
Barry?
thank you. I'm sorry, did you?
Bobby?
Did you ask?
No, not in the motion, I'll speak afterwards.
Through you to John. So, you represent us as well, too. Because we're an entity.
Yeah, this isn't just the town administration, it's the CPC. John's here representing the CPC as well.
Right,
That's
okay,
correct.
that's, I
That's
just
correct.
want to be upfront with that.
That's
Okay.
correct. We have provided a lot of advice to the CPC on other issues besides this one.
And I appreciate that. So let me just cut to the chase here. It'll take me about a minute. Okay. If there were a disagreement ultimately between the town manager and the CPC about how this goes, or between the board of selectmen and the CPC about something that comes up somewhere in the town project, do you not have the ability to erect a Chinese wall and give us representation as well as to be able to give the town representation?
If I were asked my opinion
And I
on
know
a
you want-
dispute between the CPC and the town manager,
Sure.
I would give you my very best opinion. And I can tell you, I've given opinions to the selectmen, I've given opinions to town managers, not just in this town, but in many other towns, that they don't like.
I understand.
But that's just the way it is, and that's my obligation, to give opinions that correctly interpret the charter, the bylaws, and the laws of the Commonwealth. And that's what I've done in this instance. We've done it before with the CPC, and if I don't do that job independently and professionally, then I really shouldn't be in this business.
I'm just asking because I think I understand that. That
Right.
certainly would be your first and primary role is reasonable negotiation between the two parties.
Right.
But if it and
I think the way it might work, let's spin this out. So what is really going on here? What's really the issue? You have a grant application, you recommend it, town meeting approves it, and I think what you're worried about is the town manager then taking the project and drafting any old specification that's not consistent with the specifications and the purposes for which the money was appropriated. So if I were asked early on, if you got the specifications for review and you looked at it and said, gee, this is inconsistent with the town meeting appropriation, John, what do you think? I hopefully I could play some role in helping the parties come to an agreement as to how the specification should be written to ensure consistency with the vote. And I'm happy to do that.
So we're seeing it earlier than we did in this particular case.
It would be
If there was
seen
an
earlier.
issue with the
that's right.
lines, we would have caught that
Right, in the
right
beginning.
up front.
In the bidding process.
In the bidding
Yeah.
process.
And that's where it needs to be caught
Yeah.
before
Right, because
the
one-
bids go out on the
And
street.
that was what I was going to say, is that, first of all, I want to just put something out on the table. I don't like the undertones here from that the town is trying to screw the CPC. And I feel like that message is out there. Like, every time we get an opinion from council on this board that we don't like, or some members of it don't like, we want a second opinion. No other boards in this town ask for second opinions from town council. But this one does it all the time. As a matter of fact, we spent $9,000 last summer for legal work that we never even approved. But we ended up doing it, and we paid the bill after the fact. So I think that, I don't think we need any second opinions on anything here. I don't believe that John is going to give us advice that he doesn't think is good for this board. And if he doesn't think the town administration, the Board of Selectmen are doing something right, he tells us. Believe me, I know that. I've been there. So that being said, I want to get back to the gist of it, which is what the MOU does. The MOU, in my mind, clarifies any projects that we have in the future with the town so that we don't end up in the same situation we're in right now. Because it comes to us, it gets scrutinized in the fall, we approve it, we fund it, it goes to town meeting. Now, after that point, now it goes to the RFP. At that point, that's when, whether it be this board or Park and Rec or whoever the entity is, they scrutinize the RFP. Once everyone's in agreement on the RFP and it goes out to bid and the bid's accepted, that's done. That project is underway. At that point, we really don't have any more to do unless there's a change or somebody drastically goes off the rail and starts doing stuff outside the jurisdiction of the RFP, which at that point, town administration is going to say to the contractor, hey, you stepped off the rails here and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and we're not going to pay you. We don't do that. We don't micromanage the town. And I think that this document clarifies that now.
Barry, then Linda, if you're finished, Barry.
The only other one other thing is I just want to point this is supposedly a Park and Rec project, but this was funded by a bond that was voted at town meeting. That if this CPC disappears tomorrow, the town's on the hook for that bond, not the Park and Rec, not this board, not the state of Massachusetts. The town of Nantucket is going to fund the rest of that bond. So, it should be a town project.
Okay. Barry, Linda, and then Rich.
On that topic, I'll yield to Rich for a second and come back to me.
Just to answer that, if the CPC disappears tomorrow on Nantucket, the CPA Act or CPC on Nantucket would stay in existence to cover that bond for as long as the balance remained. So it's not the town that's going to be paying that bill. It's going to come out of
the town's name's on the bond.
It's going to come out, but it's going to come out of the CPC fund would stay in existence for as long as possible to pay the balance of the bond. So I just want to clarify that.
Okay.
Linda?
There's a couple issues here. I understand
Is this on the motion?
Yes,
Rich's motion?
back to the MOU. I understand.
No, we're not on the
No.
MOU.
It's
We're
about
on the
Rich's
motion for
motion.
whether or not we submit these
Right,
these
on the
documents to the...
No, it's
No,
not.
second opinion, which
Second
you
opinion.
seconded.
Right, which I seconded. The second opinion, there's been off the rails here on this motion already. The second opinion, I think, is strictly, this was a document that was asked to be drafted by town management, correct?
In conjunction with a
With your
request
discussion.
from me
Right.
to town manager to address this issue because of the
Right.
fact that the process that was in place was incorrect
Yes.
based on the advice of town council.
Definitely incorrect. But the issue, for the reason why I seconded it, is that I think the language should be perused by someone else who doesn't have a dog in this race, or a horse in this race, or a dog in a show. So that's why I think the second opinion, just on the language of what the ramifications are of this particular language before we start monkeying with it, possibly, is not going to be detrimental to the functioning of the CPC or get in the way of what the town has to do at managing the project. Because clearly the CPC does not manage the project, the town manages the project. We're not micromanaging who's mowing it and who's putting that down and who's doing this. That is absolutely correct.
Are there any
But
further...
that's why I second it, because I think we might have another set of eyes taking a look at it to see what the impact is.
Are there any further discussion on the motion?
Well, I would like to say that I don't think that we should be in the position of second-guessing town council. And so this is an unfortunate situation, but I agree with what Bobby had to say in the matter. Thank you.
Barry?
I'm just going to quickly say thank you. With all due respect, John, that's where I was heading to at this point. I think that this committee, to keep running externally to other places to seek legal opinion, is becoming problematic. I even know that the coalition itself will give you advice upon things based upon their experience. I sit on that board, actually, so I can tell you firsthand.
Right.
But they will not give you a legal opinion.
Yeah.
Okay? So, I mean, I'm just looking for alternate mechanisms so that we're not looking at external ways for dealing with it. We can come back to the people who should be representing us from the get-go, which is your firm. That's all. And that's where I just wanted to bring that up.
I mean, I'm more than happy to take a look at any changes this committee as a whole wants to make to the MOU. We know there are some changes that have to be made based upon this discussion. And, as a collaborative process, if this board can come to a consensus as to how this would in fact work well for the CPC, give me a red line version of it, and I'll work with you and I'll work with the town manager, and hopefully everybody can pull together and come up with something that works for everyone. My recommendation is keep it in the family.
Last comment.
Agreeing with Linda's motion, I guess it is now, or is it yours?
No, it's Rich's.
Okay, whatever. It's not adversarial, or there is no undertone here. It's just asking what I think is advisable for another opinion. It's not that complicated.
But just to clarify, if we go to this DOR site, they're not going to rewrite this MOU.
I understand
They're just
that.
going to say, yeah, it's,
Right.
work
Okay,
it out with
enough.
council.
We're going to have a vote now. I'd like to have you raise your hand if you are in favor of the motion, and the motion is to send this material to the DLR website. Those in favor, please raise your hand. There are 4 raised hands. Those opposed? Ian?
I'm opposed.
And I'm opposed. So that the motion does not carry, as it is 4-4.
So if I can, Mr. Chairman, and I do apologize, I'm going to have to leave in about 5 minutes, but what I would recommend, if there are some wordsmithing issues with the MOU that you would like, and perhaps you can set up a process where they can send the comments to me, they can send them to you. Don't deliberate back and forth.
I've asked them to send the comments directly to me.
Okay.
And I would then coordinate so that there's one
Okay.
place, because I,
Is that an
because
open meeting law violation?
No. If they send, if individual comments can, as long as you don't discuss it back and
no,
forth.
we're not discussing it back and forth.
What I would recommend, though, if I may, Ken, once you get all the comments and you incorporate them, then you bring it back to a CPC meeting.
That was exactly my
And to
intention.
discuss it at a meeting and
Right.
then ship it to me.
That's correct. The idea was to do that so that I would have all the comments in one place. We would then be able to take a look at them, discuss them at a meeting where it was on the agenda,
Yeah.
and then we would have comments to get back to you.
Right.
Because as we discussed, there's 2 parts. Number one, with respect to this particular MOU, it was to try and resolve this matter, but secondly, and more importantly, it was to set up a format so that with respect to any future agreements with awards to town, that they would be done under the terms of a new MOU. Rich?
John, Ian is sits on the committee. He's not here. He commented. I don't know if he can technically vote on a
Yes, he
motion.
can.
No, I don't think he can.
I'm asking
Yes,
you,
you have the
John.
remote participation
Yes.
provision.
So he can
Yes.
not only participate, he can vote on a motion.
So some boards.
Yeah.
The only one that can't is the Board of Selectmen.
And I don't
They
think
can't.
UCC can either.
Everybody told us that on Parks and Rec we can't. Like Jack couldn't
can't.
vote on things when he was in
Land
Florida.
Bank, they couldn't vote when they were in Florida.
That's not right.
I know the
I told you
UCC
that
can.
was wrong.
Okay.
It's up to, the only one when we adopted it said was the Board of Selectmen couldn't vote remotely. The rest of the boards could.
Yeah, HDC can. For
Well,
obvious
that's up to your
reasons. For
board.
obvious reasons.
It's town council.
How many legal opinions did we just get?
Right. John.
And he said.
Well, I don't have the policy as adopted by the selectmen in front of me, so, I'm relying upon what Bob is saying, but,
Libby, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm happy to take a look at that and let Ken know what.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
and what
Thank you.
the answer is.
Thanks, John.
I will do that.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions of John with respect to the legal aspect of this at this point in time, so that we can let John catch his flight?
How much longer do you think this is going to go on?
Well, I'm going to, the next aspect is that I wanted to have a report from Kara relative to the status of where this particular project is and the resolution of the issue that has been there relative to the land.
I drive right to the airport, so I can tell you quickly that the netting is not installed.
Can you speak, come up to me with microphone? And announce yourself.
Kara Buzanowski, the DPW director. The turf field is laid. The fencing is installed. The remaining piece to be done is the netting that corrals the balls from going out of the fenced-in area. The rest is completed, and we have not signed off on it yet. We're going to be waiting to make sure that all of the construction is
Has
completed.
there been a resolution with respect to the issue of the lines which created this problem in the first place?
The lines that are installed on the field are men's soccer, men's lacrosse, and women's lacrosse. There are also tick marks for the 8v8 soccer. So if scheduling allows, and 8v8 is something that can be accommodated, it can be painted on. And according to our vendor, the paint can last an entire season. It can be touched up, so it's not as if it goes on for one game and it gets worn away. So it's something that can last. We actually had a meeting at 2 o'clock that I wasn't able to attend with the various entities that would be using the fields to instruct them on the things that they have to keep in mind about shoes and no food, just water, and different requirements that we're going to have to make sure that it stays at its best condition.
Other questions from the commission?
Through the chair, John, I want to make sure that today's meeting was properly posted in this whole conversation about specifically the MOU. What we have posted is that we were going to have an update on the playing fields.
Oh, I think that's adequate notice, absolutely.
The update on the playing fields or the discussion of the MOU?
Well, everything, yeah, because the whole genesis of the MOU is in connection with the playing field issue, and that's how it was posted. So I think there's adequate notice, is my answer.
Rich?
Thank you.
I don't think at this point in time it's worthwhile to recount the history of the last 6 to 8 months as it relates to this project. I think that would be counter at this point. Suffice it to say, for those who haven't been out there, the turf field is spectacular. Okay, I mean it is. You walk over there and you say, "Wow, it is awesome." That being said, my question to you, to the town, is when is it going to be painted? Who's going to paint it? And how is it going to be painted for the youth, which is the 80% of the community who's going to use that project and use that field? So that's my direct question.
Okay. We haven't been able to make that decision yet, and that's why I mentioned the 2 o'clock meeting. We have not determined the level of, I guess it's a use of the facility, and I can't say definitely that there will be time for the under 8s. Those are not the heaviest users, and the intention was for the heaviest users.
The intention was for it to be youth fields.
Okay,
Everybody
this
under
is something
13
that we
would be
should probably
considered-
take up at Parks and Rec.
Well, it's on there.
It's,
Yeah.
Kara, could
no,
you-
it's just, I just wanted to make a comment. She says they're not the heaviest users. The entire project was for it to be youth fields. It says it right in the application that the Parks and Rec Commission sent to you how many years ago. So for the director of the DPW to say that that it's not a youth field, when was what the CPC decided on, it's just odd, I think. That's all I have to say.
Linda?
I also want to point out that apparently, Rich can probably speak to this better, apparently the turf field came with only the end lines and the sidelines. It did not come with adult anything. Those lines were sewn in, I believe, on site,
I can confirm that.
and
that's
could have
true.
been changed to what the Parks and Rec voted on, so there'd be youth lines there. I don't know, I played lacrosse, I don't know of any adult, male or female lacrosse leagues.
That's my understanding as well.
So
There's a field
we have a
now.
youth field with no youth lines on it, permanent lines on it, but it was my understanding that they could have done anything asked when the turf field came with only the end lines and the sidelines. They could have put youth fields on it as opposed to lacrosse, obviously after some great discussion with the powers that be, that those lines could have been changed when the field came and it was laid out. That is my biggest issue now. Why was it not fixed when at a Parks and Rec meeting, Tara can probably speak to that, at a Parks and Rec meeting, they were told that the lines were too late, too bad, so sad, they're coming with those lines that we have now on the field. But actually the field came with no lines on it except for the end and the sides, and they could have changed it with the proper discussion after the Parks and Rec. They were never told that they were not coming with the lines already on the turf. That's what concerns me.
That was not the case according to the vendor.
Well,
That
that's
was-
the
What was
case
in the
that came.
RFP?
No
The existing
specifics. That was
lines.
decided by the Parks and Rec, that should have been decided by the Parks and Rec, but there you go.
I'm not, Nash isn't here to be able to be at this meeting, but so I'm speaking in an email that was CC'd to me from Nash to Kara in regards to that, exactly what Linda said, and Nash asked the DPW to not place any lines on the field until we could have a meeting about it, and as far as I know, the email from Nash to Kara was, I don't know what happened regarding that, but I know that Nash sent you an email saying to please not stop the project and not go any further, that he had talked to the landscape architect and that it was, or the person that gave the field, I didn't think we were going to get into this, so I didn't print out
No,
the email.
I got an email from Nash saying, don't pay the vendor, don't close the project. I didn't get
But
something
we were
about
also
stopping
told the
it.
lines were coming with it, and they didn't.
If you want to come up here to the microphone, please.
Just a couple quick things.
Please identify yourself.
Libby Gibson, Town Manager.
Thank you.
The application specifically says lines for soccer. It does not say youth, it does not say adult, it says soccer. Kara has offered to paint the fields however Park and Rec would like them to be painted. It does require a bit of notice. Park and Rec is not in a position to tell Kara, do this or do not do this. And I do respectfully disagree with you, Ms. Kelly, that Park and Rec has its own state statute that governs it. The town charter specifies specifically that Park and Rec Commission is part of town administration. That town charter supersedes any state law that has to do with Park and Rec. John has confirmed that numerous times in prior years, not even relating specifically to this. So we're, I think, happy to hear from Park and Rec. Do you want, they want youth soccer lines painted for the summer? Fine. We just need a little notice to paint the lines in the summer.
And I just want to be upfront and say, depending on what the use requirements are, we may not have scheduling available. I've had requests from lacrosse, from soccer, from men's soccer, from football, from
Let's not, I see people shaking their heads here like this field was built just to play kids lacrosse, kids soccer on. It's a town field. We have other fields that soccer is played on. You know, we have 2 other grass fields here. We have Delta fields. We have.
They took the Delta fields away from soccer, Bobby. It's only
You know
lacrosse.
what? It's not the only
lacrosse.
sport on this island, Linda.
I know.
And you're jaded because you're on the board and your son runs student lacrosse.
On what board?
It's our student soccer. This is not
I'm
the
not
only
on
sport
student
on this
soccer
island.
board.
Whatever. I've got to get back to work, and you guys can figure this
I'm
all
go- I'm
out.
gonna, I'm going to
Mr. Chairman, I'm out of here.
I'm going to end
I'm
this,
sorry.
end this
And
discussion
HCC is
because,
coming in here shortly.
because what I've heard from the town manager and from the head of the DPW is that they are prepared to address lines that are necessary. I'm going to ask that the head of the DPW, in view of the miscommunication involved in this situation, that you create a level of priority with respect to the lines for youth soccer for this summer in order to be able to accommodate that as, because that was the understanding of this commission relative to the principal use of those fields. But I think that there's not much more useful conversation that we can have in the sense that there's an issue. You have indicated a way to address it. You have given us a problem with timing. I'm asking you to readjust your thinking relative to the timing, try and accommodate the. Well,
Thank you for the input. I just wanted to correct something that I probably misspoke, and people are misunderstanding. The lines are boys lacrosse, boys soccer, and girls soccer. Men and boys play on the same size, and it's all set for youth.
Only the over 12, I coached, only the over 13s are playing on a full field. Everybody below that, which is a majority of the soccer teams, are playing on short 8v8 fields.
It's over 11, but whatever.
Yeah.
Very
It was a bit different when I was coaching.
As long as this conversation is going to do close out.
Yeah. Right. So if you hear the request from this commission relative to the priority relative to trying to address the lines for youth soccer, and appreciate whatever you can do to accommodate the request of the Park and Rec and the thoughts or the understanding of this commission as to the principal use of that particular playing field.
Sure.
Hearing no other comments, thank you very much, Kara. Thank you, Lily.
Thank you.
And I would like to move on the agenda with respect to the fund requisitions. Yeah.
Was there any move to readdress the memorandum of understanding at the next meeting? I didn't hear.
The issue with respect to the MOU is, it is likely to be on the next meeting, but that's not definitive, because I need to wait for the individual comments coming back to me from each of the members, to then be able to, and it may be that I'll call a special meeting to be able to address the MOU subject, because it may be a subject that will have a lot of discussion relative to the normal business of this commission.
Can we take someone step up at the next meeting to approve the requisition request?
I'm moving to that part of the agenda to approve the requisition request. There are three requisitions. I'd entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I abstain with respect to St. Paul's.
Can we put this other thing over to the next one? These other two things are new business.
Yes, in view of the time, in view of the time frame, the subjects of the rotation of projects and the CPC manager change to CPC financial manager, I would entertain a motion to have those moved to the agenda for next meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Any other business?
No, sir.
All those? I entertain a motion to
A
adjourn.
motion to adjourn at 4:26.
Second.
Any discussion? All in
Carol,
favor?
jacket.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ian, thank you for being on the phone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your vacation.
Thank you, Ken.
Where are you, Ian?
He's in Hawaii.
Oh, he's in Hawaii.
He's celebrating his wife's a major birthday for his
Well, I'm
wife.
telling you, Hyannis looks awfully good to me right now. That's as far as I've got. All right.
Tomorrow? Yeah, since it's going to be ongoing.
We need to turn that off, because we're going to have to turn it back on in like 20 minutes. I don't know how to do it either. So I think the table's sort of set up the way we have to have it set up. Sort of. These things go down the center of the table, but John always comes and fixes it, so.